Hello, it's Jane from Vanden, and today I want to go over 5 things I liked and 5 things I disliked about the Rings of Power Season 1, Episode 4. I'm implementing this evaluation format because although we're already halfway through Season 1, I'm not quite sure where this show will land on my roster of TV shows. If all goes well, the characters, the storylines, and the plots will level up to past shows that I really enjoy, like Breaking Bad, Mad Men, ER with George Clooney, and HBO's Rome from back in the days. Those shows rank high on my list of great shows, so hopefully The Rings of Power gets there. Even if some of the shows like Rome Season 2 had its flaws, the quality of the writing, the character developments, and the plots were of high quality. And that's what I'm expecting from The Rings of Power because A, it's a Tolkien adaptation, and B, Jackson set the bar very high. So I'll start things up with a quick and dirty recap of episode 4 before going through the likes and dislikes. So we open up with Queen Regent Muriel waking up from a prophetic dream about the destruction of Numenor. Next is a scene of an angry Numenorian crowd complaining about their job security should they let the elves on the island. Ar-Pharazôn then subdues the crowd by reminding them of their lineage, their greatness, and by offering everybody a round of drinks. We then cut to the first of 2 flirting scenes between Kemen and Eärien. Then Galadriel asks Muriel to send soldiers to the Southlands where Sauron has taken up shop. Muriel rejects this. Galadriel rudely demands an audience with the king, which leads to Galadriel being thrown in jail. The next scene shows Isildur distracted by the voice of a woman calling him from the distance, and the Seamaster boots both him and 2 of the other trainees from the sailing program. We then shift to Arondir and the revelation of Adar and learn that Arondir is from Beleriand, that Adar has been there before, and that Arondir is to present the Southlanders with an ultimatum: surrender their claims over the land and join Sauron or die. We then cut to the south where the locals are kinda rounded up in an abandoned elven watchtower and are running low on supplies. Theo and another boy, they sneak back to the village to collect provisions. Things don't go well. Theo gets attacked by orcs. He uses the mysterious blade that he found earlier to defend himself, and the scene ends with him hiding in a well while his friend totally bails. Next is a scene with Celebrimbor expressing concern that the dwarves are up to something, which prompts Elrond to head off to do a little bit of detective work. Once in Khazad-dûm, Elrond discovers that Durian and Disa are in fact keeping a secret. They're keeping discovery of Mithril secret from everyone, not everyone, almost everyone, even the king. This scene ends with Durian and Elrond rushing into a cave to save four dwarves from a mining disaster. The next scene is a scene of Kemen and Eärien flirting back in Numenor. We're then taken to Galadriel and Halbrand in jail, where Galadriel locks 4 guards in her previous cell and walks away after Ar-Pharazôn tells her that she is to be brought back to Middle-earth. Next is a scene of Eärien and a regretful Isildur. He's like he's in the midst of a bit of an existential crisis. Then we're brought back to Galadriel, and it turns out that after escaping jail, she headed back to the king's private chamber, but instead runs into Muriel, who leads her to the tower and shows her Numenor's doomed future through the Palantir, which apparently begins with the arrival of Galadriel. Galadriel takes the opportunity to plead to Muriel to take up fight alongside the elves against Sauron, but Muriel says no. Then we cut to Arondir saving Theo. The sequence is he saves Theo, then they escape. They escape the orcs, then they run into Bronwyn, and the 3 escape from the orcs thanks to the rising of the sun. This cuts to a beautiful transition of Disa singing a plea to the rocks to release the bodies of the miners with breath still inside them. This plea works and the miners survive, but we learn in the next scene that during the third Durian IV's dad, he reinforced the ban on mining mithril, which angers Durian IV. Elrond reminds Durian how lucky he is to have a dad, which prompts Durian IV to make peace with his father, Durian III. This is so confusing. The sequence ends with Durian agreeing to go to London with Elrond. Next, we cut to Arondir telling Bronwyn of Adar's ultimatum, and what's his name? That guy there, Walgrand, I think it's Walgrand, telling Theo that the meteor that crashed in the first episode, that coincides with the arrival of Sauron, or the return of Sauron rather. The next scene is a shot of an orc telling Adar that they have found something in the tower. My best guess is that this is the tower that Theo found and used earlier to defend himself against the orc. And the final scene we get is Galadriel's departure. In that scene, she's supposed to leave, but then like the white tree, Nimloth, starts to shed petals, which marks a turning point for Muriel, who decides to use her scheduled speech later to let the Númenóreans know that she will accompany Galadriel back to Middle-earth to take up arms against Sauron in defense of the Southlanders. So, and the episode ends with Isildur, Elendil, and a handful of Númenóreans joining the expedition. So that's it for my little recap. So now, in no particular order, I wanna jump straight into my likes and my dislikes. I'll start with the likes. My first like is Ar-Pharazôn's speech to the Númenóreans at the marketplace. The scene is good because when Ar-Pharazôn puts an end to the unrest of the angry man, the show lets us know that the Númenóreans, they trust him. And it's creating a situation in which the man will accept him as the next king of Númenor. I predict that Ar-Pharazôn will accomplish this in the next few episodes when Queen Regent Muriel is off to Middle-earth with Galadriel and Elendil. Now, this is a variation from Tolkien's account. In Akalabath, Ar-Pharazôn forcefully married Muriel to become the ruler of Númenor. Years later, Pharazôn gets word of the rise of Sauron, and he arrogantly sails to Middle-earth to hunt down Sauron. While his attack on Mordor was successful, he foolishly brings Sauron back to Númenor as a captive. Sauron, who is a Maya and therefore way smarter and more conniving than Ar-Pharazôn, goes from being a prisoner to being like his right-hand man, like his mentor, and tricks Pharazôn and the Númenóreans into the worship of Morgoth. This led to the destruction of a secret temple. There were human sacrifices. They were killing a lot of innocent people. This led to the burning of the White Tree, and it ended with an arrogant expedition led by Ar-Pharazôn to Valinor, which ultimately resulted in the destruction of Númenor and the Númenóreans, with the exception of the faithful. So like Isildur, Elendil, and a few others, a few others. So while Amazon has deviated from the source material, I think their adaptation and rise of Pharazôn that's playing out is interesting, and I'm excited to see how it will play out. Now, my second like is the romance they are building between Kemen and Eärien. This romance is interesting because with Kemen being the son of Ar-Pharazôn and Eärien being the daughter of Elendil, who is the leader of the faithful, they're building, a classic Romeo and Juliet scenario, so it will be interesting to see how things play out between the two. I also like that this is a romance between two made-up characters. Kemen and Eärien are not characters in Tolkien's work, so if their romance turns out to be lame and cringy, we can take comfort in knowing that authentic characters have been spared from ridicule. Now, but I don't think this will be the case. I have a good feeling about these two. I also really love that scene when Eärien tells Isildur that she just came back from dinner, and Isildur's just like, who is he? I think it's super cute. Another like from me is the entire Elrond, Disa, Durian, and Khazad-dûm storyline, because there is great chemistry between those three characters. The contrast between the proud, stern, and stubborn Durian versus the calm, wise, stoic Elrond is played out really well, and it's really well balanced. Those actors are doing a fantastic job. The playful relationship between Durian and Disa is also well executed. They're so fun to watch on screen. It's always a huge plus and awesome when the show can properly and in a really funny way depict a relationship where it is the woman who wears the pants. And Disa is also hilarious.
You're staying for dinner.
He's leaving.
He's staying.
He's leaving.
He's staying.
I also think not only do both actors have remarkable voice tones, like it's really strong and it really carries, like it's befitting for dwarves, but the acting is very strong from those two actors. And they also have fantastic dialogues and heartwarming scenes and moments to work with. So it's so far they're fantastic. One of the scenes that moved me the most was when Elrond offered Durian words of wisdom about his own father, which in turn moved Durian to apologize to his father. This scene gets 5 gold stars for staying true to the source material because yes, when Elrond was young, his father was instrumental in the defeat of Morgoth, and as a reward, he now sails across the night sky with a Silmaril on his brow that emits a bright light, and the star, the Elendil in the sky with the Silmaril on his brow, is known by the elves of Middle-earth as the Star of Eärendil. I must also say that I love Robert Aramayo as Elrond. I remember during an interview during the San Diego Comic-Con when the interviewee asked members of the cast to describe their characters in one word, and Robert used the word orphan to describe Elrond, the character of Elrond, which was all the validation I needed to know that this actor would not let me down, and so far he has, and so I'm excited to see how he continues to play Elrond. Now my fourth like. My fourth like is the transition from Arondir, Bronwyn, and Theo's escape from the elves at sunrise to Khazad-dûm, where Disa sings the powerful plea to the rocks to release the bodies of the miners with breath still inside them. There was so much strength and force in her voice, and the scene was so well executed that it makes the idea of using the power of one's voice to plead to the mountains incredibly credible, because it's a silly concept, but they make it work. I also think it illustrates the incredible relationship that exists between dwarves and the mountains, which of course contributes to their phenomenal mining and crafting skills. So love that transition. The number 5 on my list, the last one of my list of likes, is the intensity in Elendil and Muriel's face when they notice the petals falling off the white tree. Muriel takes this as a sign that the Valar are upset with her for helping Galadriel. She changes her mind, and in order to rally up a group of fighters, she explains to the Númenóreans that when the petals of the white tree fall, it is the very tears of the Valar reminding them that A, their eyes and judgment are ever upon them, and that B, there is a fateful hour in the destiny of man when they must decide who they should be. This is a slight deviation from the lore, but I think Muriel's the petals as the tree of the Valar metaphor is on par with what the white tree symbolizes in the lore. And Akalabeth, Muriel's father Tar-Palantir prophesies that if the white tree was ever to be destroyed, then the line of the Númenórean kings would end. The show took this original idea and kind of elaborated it with the idea that the Valar, who are kind of like gods, they communicate to the Númenóreans through this tree. And the idea here is that when the tree is healthy, this means that the men are behaving well, but when the tree is in decay, it means that bad things are going on. So now we're gonna move to my dislikes. My first dislike is a continuation of the immature, senseless and angsty characterization of Galadriel. We see this in the scene when she's thrown in jail by Muriel for rudely demanding an audience with the king, which leads to her receiving a behavioral lesson from Halbrand. I'll say this before and I'll say it again. Galadriel of the Second Age is a wise, respectable, and married an Eldorian princess who has spent a good number of years before this under the mentorship of Melian, who is a very wise Maya. There's no reason why she should be this stupid and getting schooled by Halbrand. This portrayal of Galadriel gives a bad rep to the Noldor and the House of Finarfin, which is unacceptable because incredible characters like Finrod and Gil-galad, depending on the source, are tied to the House of Finarfin. So with her attitude and lack of diplomacy, Galadriel is tarnishing the family name by associating herself with them. I must also stress that I have nothing with Morfydd Clark. As an actress, she's really great. It's just the material that's poor. My second dislike, unfortunately, is still with Galadriel. It's a continuation of Warrior Galadriel and that cringy and very poorly choreographed sequence when she locks 4 Númenórean guards in a prison cell. My main issue with this scene is that it totally undermines the capabilities of the Númenóreans. The Númenóreans are a superior race of men. The Númenóreans are a group of men who sailed to Middle Earth, marched into Mordor, and gave Sauron himself a run for his money. Shots like this, it makes the Númenóreans appear incompetent, weak, and even foolish, which is the opposite of the battle prowess that they have that is depicted in the works of Tolkien. I wish the writers would stop with all of this nonsense and take a cue from Jackson's portrayal of Arwen, which by the way is Galadriel's granddaughter. Jackson's Arwen, she comes off as incredibly strong, intelligent, and capable without ever once taking up arms against anyone whatsoever.
If you want him, come and claim him.
A good way to compare Galadriel and Arwen would be just by doing an analysis of Arwen riding a horse and Galadriel riding a horse. Which one is better in your opinion? Another dislike is that Adar spares Arondir. Now I like Arondir and I'm glad that he survives, but let's ask ourselves good questions. What was so special about him that prompted the orcs to spare him? Was it because he was such a good warrior? Did they know that Adar was on the hunt for a messenger? I get that Arondir and Adar bonded over the knowledge of Quenya and how they've both been to Beleriand, but there isn't enough justification for me to justify the release, because it seems to me what Adar should have done was, get rid of Arondir, because with Arondir out of the picture, Adar could have more easily sort of poached the Southlanders to his side, particularly since they are descendants of folks who sided with Morgoth in the past. So I don't get the logic behind keeping Arondir alive. I'm glad he's alive, but I don't get the logic. So I guess we'll see how things play out. Another dislike is the scene of Isildur on the ship, hearing the voices of a woman in the distance calling his name. The scene is similar to the boat scene in the previous episode, except this time around, Isildur is distracted by the voice and makes a dangerous boating error, while in last week's episode, he saved one of his peers from a dangerous accident. My problem with this scene is the instructor. His dismissal of the 2 other cadets was overkill, to me. Isildur, I get. Isildur was distracted at a critical time, but it was excessive to also dismiss the 2 others whose only fault was to try to help. It was just I don't know, it seems a little much. And you know, this really had me questioning the qualifications of the instructors. Like, where did they dig up this guy? And really made me question that weird "the sea is always right" slogan. I already hate it, but now I have reason to hate it even more because I don't like the instructor. He's unfair. Then my final dislike of the show is the slow motion action sequence in which Theo, Elrond and Bronwyn escape the orcs. Slow motion battle sequences can be effective, can be an effective way of making, you know, a general statement about violence and loss. Totally like that's totally true. Jackson did this really well in the Two Towers when Haldir dies. The Theo, Elrond and Bronwyn escape sequence did not, in my opinion, merit a slow motion moment because their escape was poorly executed. They're saved by the sun, but the sun had not even risen when they had escaped the forest. So after exiting the wood, they kind of just stood there and waited for the sun to rise, which was anticlimactic because while we, the audience, we knew that the orcs can't survive in sunlight. Maybe I missed it, but when were Theo and Bronwyn made aware of this fact? Maybe I missed it in the previous episode, but it seems to me that all three of them should have kept running instead of staying like in that same position for what seemed like forever because of the slow motion. It made it worse. And you know what? I have another bone to pick with this scene because last week, when Arondir lost his friend, Amazon tried really hard to replicate what Jackson did in the Two Towers when Haldir died. When Haldir dies in the Two Towers, the scene slows down as Haldir gets mortally wounded by the Uruk-hai, and he looks around at the bodies of his fallen soldiers, and he's in a bit of a daze. Aragorn runs up to him, and it's all very sad. And throughout all of this, a soft, slow, beautiful elvish music plays throughout the sequence, and it grips our heartstrings. Amazon tried really hard to replicate this last week in the scene when Arondir's friend gets killed. But this did not have the same effect because A, unlike Haldir, we had just met this guy, and B, the music was overpowering and overkill because again, we had just met this guy like a minute ago. Like, this music, it's not gonna impact us. It was just a fail to me, and I did not like it. I was just disappointed because it reminded me of Haldir, and I'm like, no. Anyways, I know I sound like a bit of a malcontent after listing all of the dislikes, but overall, believe it or not, I think this episode was pretty good. You know, the plot is starting to move along, and I'm invested in some of the storylines and characters. I'm going to keep watching, definitely, and I hope that the series rises up to, you know, to its potential. I'll leave things here for today. Of course, if you have any thoughts, don't be afraid to leave a note in the comments. And if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really does help. Farewell.